now it's live. Okay.
You are live now. Okay, good. We're live now. Why can't I get to my own YouTube channel? This is stupid. Who's streaming? Alright, good. Alright, I don't know how I could see who joins, but like, how are y'all doing today? Wow, it's actually going on my YouTube. Wow, this is like interesting. Alright, I don't know how. 3 watching? Alright, how are y'all doing? If you could like, if this is coming in nicely for you, just type in the chat, because I'm just chilling here. Here, wait. Hype. Oh, we've already got someone here. Okay, cool.
All right, I just talked to Taz. He's on his way.
Yeah, I didn't think we'd get someone in here really quickly, but like we did, so it's okay. Good.
I mean, yeah, I made a video on it today.
Yeah. Not everyone has over 20,000 on TikTok, okay? So like not everybody's privileged like that to have people join right as they start a stream. Okay. So, you guys, thank you all for like the positive, stuff in the chat right now. I'm watching it on both so I could see. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
I got it. How do we... There we go. This is the most important event of my Valentine's Day. So true. Taz, you there?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Do you want to talk first, or do you want me to talk first?
Oh, you can go ahead.
All right, so I guess I'm going to be the moderator. This is the Ancap debate between Taz and Austro Clo. You guys could start with your opening statements.
So true. Okay. I don't know why I say that all the time. All right. Okay. So I just wanted to say, for the purposes of those of you watching, I am not an Ancap. This is a LARP. And basically, the only thing I want to start out by saying, because it's the only frame of reference I have as far as Taz's knowledge on Ancap, he said that it's basically when chaos. This is not true. There are still laws under Ancap. They're just not universal. And they're all derived from the moral principle known as the NAP. Basically, you cannot aggress against someone or their property if you do not want to have that happen to you back. So the idea that anarchy is when chaos is just not true. And yeah.
You cut out a little bit for me at the last part.
I just said that anarchy is not when chaos, and basically there are laws. They're just not universal.
Mod, can you understand her?
Yes, I can. She is coming in clearly for me, so it's got to be your Wi-Fi.
Okay, I got you. Just one moment.
All right. Meanwhile, we're gonna address the most interesting comment we got on the live chat. Debunk BBC.
Stop it, Christian.
No, I'm being serious. All right, Taz, it's your Wi-Fi. You talk now. Your opening statement.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what did you say in yours? I couldn't hear. I think I fixed it now.
All right. Basically, all I said is that he left.
We're having well, we're not, but Taz he's having technical difficulties. Yeah. Yo, we got 12 people on here, but that's pretty good.
We'll wait till he comes back, I guess.
I'm gonna live stream this on my like TikTok and then just tell people to go here.
Base. Okay, he's here. He's back.
I got disconnected. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay. I think it had a shit moment there.
Yeah. Good job.
Okay. So what were you saying?
All I said was that the only frame of reference I have is to your knowledge on anarchy is that you believe that it's inherently chaotic, which is not true. There are still laws under anarchy. Anarchy is not when no laws. They're just not a huge doctrine of universal laws. They're based on individual REAs, and they're all laws, in air quotes, are based on the NAP, which is a moral principle based off of non-aggression. So if you were to aggress against me or my property, I can act in retaliatory force against you.
Okay, who would be there to hold the NAP? I believe you called it.
Yes, REAs, rights enforcement agencies.
Okay, but who's to say that's law?
What do you mean?
If I'm gonna have a society, right, and not even me, if I'm part of a society, how or who's gonna be the one in society to go, look, this is the law and this is the law you're gonna follow as the NAP?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. That's why laws are not universal here. The thing is, rights and laws, the thing is that they are derived from social norms. All laws are based off of social norms. I think we can agree that it's a social norm not to kill people, which is why we sort of recognize it as such. So when it comes to rights and laws and all that stuff, it would all just be derived from what is a social norm and basically the societal recognition of rights, because you always need that.
I mean, sure, but who's there to say, sure, who's there though, again, to say, well, this is the law? Is
Well,
it
that
like
would be
some
the REA.
transitionary period?
No, that would be the REA. So, like,
who's to say the REAs get the that status to say what's the law and what's not the law?
what do you mean? They're not the ones deciding what the law is. They just operate off of it.
Okay, then who's the one to decide what the law is?
Again, it's there's no real laws. First of all, second of all, everything is based off of the NAP, the non-aggression principle. You need in order.
I'll just assume it. Yeah. Okay. I would just assume it's like some transitionary period. I mean, that's.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say basically, if you were gonna do something like that, you would have to have some form of a transitionary period. To establish, like, well, if you're gonna have something as a law, or like we could say that the NAP in certain aspects could be kind of subjective to an extent of, well, how would you define aggressing upon someone's property? And I'm sure this probably has been talked about, but I have not heard of it. We could say light, for example, going on someone's property could be a violation, but again, there's probably something there, but.
Okay,
that's kind of,
as you say, it's pretty subjective. Like, that's the whole point. Like, all laws as of now and in the future, regardless of what kind of law system we were to implement or lack thereof, the interpretation of laws is always going to be subjective because it requires interpretation. Interpretation and perception are inherently subjective things. So if that's going to be the case, if you're going to have interpretation and perception, it's going to be subjective regardless.
Sure, but again, that kind of agrees with me that in cases of this, it would be subjective, and there would be kind of different disputes here over what's a violation and what's not a violation.
Well, yes, I mean, that's why we have the judicial system, is to determine whether or not the NAP is violated.
What's to stop the courts from arguing from a utilitarian framework? Because I would assume that, like, I don't want to assume your position, but I would assume you're not a utilitarian.
I'm not.
Okay.
But, like, what do you mean? Like, give me a for instance.
From the NAP, you would basically say it's not right to aggress upon someone's property. However, in a court, a private court, one could argue from a utilitarian side, which doesn't necessarily agree with the NAP, right?
So you mean utilitarian as in, like, okay, I stole your money, but I bought you something with it? That kind of scenario?
Any form where the consequences benefit the many over the few.
Okay, well, the NAP is not a utilitarian framework. So if
I know that's
based off of the NAP, then there's no way to argue or, like, to debate within the judicial system on whether or not something good came out of whatever happened. It's just, did you violate property rights or did you not, basically? That's what the debate would be over, not what happened after you violated property rights.
But what's to stop them from arguing from a utilitarian framework?
It's just, it's not a result of the NAP. The NAP is not a utilitarian framework in and of itself, so you can't really make a utilitarian argument from it. Like, the NAP doesn't say, oh yeah, well, if you violated my property rights, but you went and bought me a candy bar with it, so it's okay. It says if you violate property rights, you are allowed to act in retaliatory force. That's it.
Okay, what about someone who can't afford insurance, or what'd you call it?
like rights enforcement.
Yes.
If they can't afford it, that's like they wouldn't even exist within this society. Like in order to exist in an Ancap society, you would have to have the money to afford land. And if you can't afford land, then chances are you aren't going to be able to afford rights protection.
So what are they supposed to do if someone violates them?
Well, they just wouldn't exist in this society. Like, this is my point. Like, these people would not be able to own land, so they just wouldn't exist. Only people with enough money to own land would exist in this society.
Where were they supposed to go?
What do you mean? Like, I don't.
If they like, what? So you just like saying homeless people just wouldn't exist?
Yes, they would not exist because there wouldn't be such thing as public land.
Okay, we could say someone is in an apartment complex and then the landlord kicks them out. They don't have this property anymore.
Right, and so if they're on someone else's private property without their consent, then that's when they go to prison. That's when you take them to court and say, oh, if you want, of course, if you voluntarily, if you do not voluntarily allow this person onto your private property, because again, all land would be private, so you're going to be on someone's private property and they don't want that, then they're going to take you to court and, you know, you're going to be prosecuted, you're going to go to jail. So anyone who doesn't own land would be in prison for the most part.
Just for being homeless?
Not for being homeless, for being on others' private property, because that's
okay.
a violation.
Okay, yeah. Sure. But then, so what are they supposed to do in prison?
What do you mean?
How is that prison going to be funded?
It would be prison, so it'd be run like a corporation.
Well, if we assume that they're homeless and no one's going to care for them, who's going to pay for their stay in the prison?
Well, again, private prisons. So private prisons would be partnered with REAs and the court systems, these private courts. So, you know, you just pay for it in the same sense. Not only that, but going back to homeless people, there would still be private charity shelters. Like we have homeless shelters now, and some are public, some are private. If they're run by, you know, like a private charity, then they'll receive their funding as such.
What's to stop a corporation from killing all like taking over a town and just killing everyone?
What do you mean by like killing everyone? Obviously, that's a violation of the NAP.
Oh no, but what's to stop them from doing so?
Again, the prosecution they'll face if they do that.
We could say a rights enforcement agency could just all team up and just kill everyone.
What's the incentive to do that?
They're just wanting they just like murder. The CEOs just love murder for some apparent reason. Now they're having a Michael Myers episode.
Okay, well, I mean, there has to be some kind of incentive because the thing is, REAs will always have a profit motive to make money, you know, because like that's what they do, you know, and so they're obviously going to want to be the best REA and receive the most customers, and the best way to do that is to have the best rights enforcement, not to kill people. Obviously, there's not going to be any incentive for people to buy from them or to employ them if they're just going around killing people.
Well, that would presuppose that they only are looking for an incentive and there's no other thing that they could do. I mean, again, I would say there's been
incentive behind a murder.
Sorry, what?
There's always an incentive behind a murder, even if it's police brutality.
I mean, sure, but I'm referring to an incentive mainly on I misstated that. There's not always an incentive per se towards a reward from the how can I put this monetary benefits of others. I think that's how I could.
Okay, well, do you consider yourself a capitalist? I know you're a conservative, but do you?
Sure.
Okay, so do you believe that companies have a profit motive?
If they set out to make a company, then I would assume that they would. They're looking for a profit. Yes.
Okay, so if they have a profit motive and killing people is not going to increase that profit for them, why would they do it?
Because many people don't think rational to the point, or how can I put this? They, I'm having really a hard time to word this.
It's okay.
Yeah. They're not always going to be into that one position of always looking for a profit motive, right? Because there's been, if you want me to look this up, I'm sure, but I think we can logically both conclude this, that there's been multiple cases throughout history where there's been people who just would do something for money, and then they probably turn around and killed someone. For example, we could say someone is cleaning a pool or a pool boy from someone, right? They got really pissed off and angry at the owner, and then they killed the owner, right? We could say something along those lines, but inevitably it would be that they we could say they violated the NAP and killed them.
Right, and the motive there would be anger, right? The anger and hatred.
Okay, yeah. So what's to stop the REAs from doing this?
Well, why would they be angry at the citizens that are paying them to stay alive and to flourish?
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be the citizens who's paying them. I mean, through competition, there should probably be more REAs in the area.
Well, yes, there would be more REAs in the area, and that's the thing about competition is, one REA is, going to have better prices or better quality, and that's where people are going to be more likely to go. But if you start violating the NAP or start violating people's rights and stuff like that, or just, do a shit job at what you're supposed to be doing, then obviously people are going to be like, they're just not going to pay you anymore.
Who's to say they can't force some money from you? Because essentially government can do that as well.
Well, yes, but that's the thing. The government thrives off of a monopoly on force, and they have to survive. They have to do one of two things to survive. It's always a violation of property rights, but they either have to tax or they have to strike down competition on private property. And so they have to do one of those two things, which is inherently a violation of property rights. However, an REA is not going to have a monopoly on force. And so obviously they can't violate property rights, or there's going to be, an issue there when it comes to justice.
Well, they become a monopoly on force from violating property rights. You could say the same on government.
And again, because the thing is all things within this society would be voluntary. So I voluntarily pay this REA to protect my rights. And if they start violating my rights or others' rights, and I see that, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that, I retract my payment.
Everything is voluntary?
Yes.
Can you elaborate more? Because I wouldn't say everything is voluntary.
Well, yes, everything is voluntary. You can voluntarily, pay REAs to protect your rights. You sign contracts in human interaction. Everything would be based on voluntarism. That like if you engage in an action that is not voluntary by yourself or the other person, then that's inherently a violation of the NAP or the axiom of self-ownership.
If you believe every action is voluntary, what if I held the gun to your head and told you to do something?
Well, obviously that.
Sorry,
you cut out for me.
Yeah, she's cutting out. I was making sure it wasn't my Wi-Fi.
Oh, where did I cut out?
Just like 10 seconds ago.
Okay, yeah. So all I said was that, like, obviously that action, you holding a gun to my head and making me do something, would be coercive, which is
that's my point.
Right. So then that's prosecuted.
Is...
Any action that is involuntary is prosecutable.
Yeah. So not every action is voluntary.
Well, yes, not every action is.
Okay. How would you basically say something is voluntary, non-voluntary? What's the distinction?
Whether or not coercion is involved by one of the parties.
Coercion, does it have to be by a person?
Well, only actors can act in coercion.
What would you define as an actor?
Hello?
What would you define as an actor?
Oh, I said a rational being that can, make the decision or have the capacity to act.
When you say a capacity to act, do you mean basically have the general ability to, we could say like someone with autism to punch, like someone with autism can punch you, right? But they don't have the general capacity to ration and take that into account, right?
Well, yes, they do to an extent. I mean, yeah, they do.
Well, people with severe autism doesn't necessarily know how to ration very well, right? I've seen some.
Well, yeah, not as high as like me or you, but they can still act with rationality. Like animals can still act to a certain degree of rationality, but not nearly the same level as a human being.
Well, I've seen people with autism, like, or one person at least, sexually harass a girl and they didn't actually realize that they were sexually harassing them. I would say that would be a violation of property rights. Right.
So if that were to happen, if we were to have a human being that does not have the level of rationality to understand, those things, if you have to have you have to understand rights in order to have them. So if you don't understand rights, like small children, for example, when we're talking about child labor and the age of consent, they don't have the level of rationality to consent to these things. So they can't agree to it because you have to understand rights in order to have them. So if a person has extreme autism to the point where they can't understand these things, then they don't have those other rights to begin with. So it would be completely okay to jail them simply on the basis of doing that.
So it would be okay to kill them?
No, not. I mean, if they were threatening my life, if they were if an autistic person was pointing a gun at my head, then yes, it would be okay. But you can only act in retaliatory force.
Retaliatory force towards what?
Towards anything. So, if you came into my house and you threatened to kill me, it would be completely okay for me to kill you since you're putting my life at risk.
Okay. Sure. I'm confused. What was the point of this again? What's significant about that?
I was just going in depth more on property rights. I mean, you were asking questions.
Okay, yeah. So essentially, again, what's to stop? I'm so confused on your answer on this. What's to stop a corporation to come in again and just kill you? Because we could potentially say that a lot of people in your town. We could say a private picture of you got leaked across this small little town. Everyone's laughing at your size, right? So you're pissed off, and then you go to take hostage. We'll say it's a very loose term, but we'll say that over the town. What's to stop this town from doing this?
What's to stop them from doing what? Taking hostage of me?
Yeah, and I'm using that term loosely.
I mean, if they were to do that, that obviously would be a violation of my self-ownership. And, once I was able to escape, or if someone realized I was missing and they found me or whatever, that's when the other person would be prosecuted. The thing is you can't stop these things from occurring at all. What you can do is prosecute people for doing them.
What do you mean you can't stop them?
Well, you can't stop murder from happening. You're never going to eliminate murder from society, or rape or kidnapping or any other violent crime like that. But what you can do is prosecute people for engaging in those crimes, just like we do now.
Sure, but would you say at least to the extent that corporations might get more violent than government? Because I'm more aware. I'm aware that government could also do this, right? However, I would say there's a spectrum in how it's going to happen and the execution on how it happens, right? I would say corporations would probably do it at least more indirectly than government, or we could say directly. Sorry, what?
Can you give an example so I understand a little better?
A corporation, or an example to all of it?
Yeah, and how a corporation would do this more indirectly than the state.
By corporation, I should probably define it more. By corporation, I simply mean, well, never mind. I'll say just a corporation. That could be misconstrued. So essentially, we could say a corporation could kill someone through more of an indirect effect. For example, let me say, we could have climate change or something through that general point, right? Air pollution. We could say this is more of an indirect effect, which could lead to more effects killing someone. I wouldn't necessarily blame it on the corporation, but the corporation played a huge factor into doing this, right?
Right. So
with government.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, talk about environmentalism if you want. So as far as that goes, everything again in this society would be based off the protection of property rights. So if a corporation were to, for example, let's say they're a plastic maker, and they use their oil and they spill some oil onto another person's property. If you don't want that oil on your property, again, this would be a violation of property rights. And obviously at this point, you could take the corporation to court. However, I will say that in this society, it is highly unlikely that oil would be the main use of production, or any other polluting substance would be the main use of electricity or anything like that, mainly because we wouldn't have subsidies. And subsidies are a large reason why corporations continue to use these non-renewable forms of energy, because they're so much cheaper when you add on subsidies.
I mean, sure. If you want to talk about countries that doesn't necessarily have oil deposits, we could say you're from the Middle East and there's a bunch of oil here, right? So I would say it would be more cheaper just to get oil from down the street through a reserve than spending $10,000 on one solar panel, right?
Right, and again, one of the reasons oil is so expensive is because the state subsidizes it, and I am against subsidies. I don't know about you, but yeah.
Subsidies. I'm for it to an extent.
Okay. Like on subsidies on what?
Something that I would say that's in dire need. For the most part, at least, right? Because what's profitable doesn't necessarily mean what's socially useful, right? So we could say that there's this one special company, mainly in this area, that specializes in making equipment for a certain rare disorder. It doesn't necessarily I'm not going to give out a name. I'm just making it off the top of my head. This is a very rare disorder, but for some reason in this town there is like at least 10 people out of 10,000 that has this in this town, right? This company decides no longer that they're going to make this equipment because it's failing and they're not keeping a profit off of keeping these 10 people alive, right? So essentially, they switch their profits to, or not their profits, but their production to other products, we'll say, and then they start benefiting another group, right? So essentially, you're just letting these 10 people die.
Yeah, and why is death really bad? Can you substantiate that?
And what do you mean by inherently?
Why is death bad? Like, if you're going to make this kind of a utilitarian suggestion, you need to you need to substantiate why death is bad.
Me personally, or I can definitely
From a
answer for me personally,
framework, why is death bad?
What says I'm arguing from a utilitarian framework?
You just did whenever you said, "Oh yeah, well we're just going to let these 10 people die," whatever. Like when you're saying, "Oh yeah, well companies should have to continue to produce this thing because
I could say the company is made up of 100 people versus 10 people."
You would what?
I could say this company is made up of 100 people compared to the 10 people.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't really matter how many. This is what I'm saying. If you're talking about the general benefit, benefit of society, that's utilitarian. So if you're going to make a utilitarian framework, you kind of have to tell me why death is bad.
Well, I'm not arguing for the benefits of society. I'm just saying that you're just going to let these 10 people die. The company can no longer support them, right? I'm not saying they have an entitlement to, right? But the least we could do is through government subsidization. Then
through
we could possibly
welfare
help.
programs?
If you want to say that, we could say some other things like immigration, not immigration. I'm sorry. What is it? Tourism. We could say something like that. The government could pay something. Could have some special program that tourists would love to do. That's usually that I would go for in terms of funding, not necessarily taxation through social programs or anything. But we could say social programs.
Okay, so I mean, back to taxation. If we're going to go with taxation, then why is taxation a beneficial thing in your eyes when it's a violation of property rights?
How is it a violation of property rights voluntarily?
So you're talking about voluntary contributions then?
We can say both for the sake of the argument.
So both coercive taxation and voluntary contributions?
Yeah, sure.
So similar to the society we live in now because we have charities. Okay, so I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how much voluntary contributions you have if you still have coercive taxation. It's clearly a violation of property rights. I think we can agree on that now.
Why is taxation? Wait, are you basically saying taxation is theft?
I mean, yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, why? Because
it's quite literally the definition of theft. It's coercive taking of something. Like you're actually coercing these people into giving it up. If you don't take it, if you don't give it up, you go to jail. Like that's coercion.
Okay, let's say an immigrant is coming over, right? The United States, whatever country you're going to, goes, look, okay, if you come over here, we're going to tax you. And if you come over here, you have to agree with it to live here. You go, okay, right? So they come over there and they tax you. So that's theft, even though you agreed previously before you were in the country.
So if the state, so we're saying the state says to these immigrants, okay, yeah, if you want to live here, you are going to be taxed?
Essentially.
Okay, so I mean, if you're living on your own private property or you're renting out somebody else's private property voluntarily and you're utilizing that private property, I don't see, you're not using the state's land by doing that. So why it's not really like an implicit contract or a social contract in that nature.
So let me give you this, right? So you're gonna move into a new neighborhood. It's a gated community. Um, the owner of the gated community, we could say this could represent a country.
Mm-hmm.
Goes, look, if you want to live here, you have to pay at least $10 in fees per se towards I don't know, the security, like the security guards and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
This could represent towards social programs or helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
So you go, okay, so then you buy your plot of land in this gated community, and now you build a house there and so forth, and you get taxed, right? This is essentially taxation.
No, it's not, because I mean, if you're signing a contract to live there, like an actual physical contract, and saying, okay, yeah, I'm agreeing to voluntarily contribute X amount of money in order to live here, that's different. I mean, when it comes to the state, there's no contract. I didn't agree to pay this money. When moving into it, in your scenario, when moving into this gated community, you'd be voluntarily agreeing to pay this money.
What's the difference between a contract and me physically telling you I'll pay it?
Well, because a contract, has, an agreement behind it, a voluntary agreement. Whereas, I never agreed to pay taxes by living in this state. Our forefathers agreed. The founding fathers said, "Okay, yeah, we're going to have some kind of tax system," but I never agreed to it in and of myself, just because my ancestors did.
Oh, so you're basically saying if you don't agree to something, that it shouldn't maintain to you at all?
Exactly. Yes. If you do not voluntarily agree to something, no. Otherwise, that would be coercion.
Okay, cool. Let me ask you this: what's your stance on abortion?
I'm a departurist. Do you know?
Why? Yeah, I know departurism. Yeah, I briefly know what it is. I'll say that. I don't know the full story behind it.
Okay.
So since a fetus can't say that they agree to not being killed, right? So therefore, why can't we kill it?
Because I mean, it's sort of like an implicit contract, if you ask me. However, at the same time, I don't believe that you can kill somebody simply if they're not a threat to you. If there was like medical issues with a woman, I think that we could take an evictionist position on that. However, when the fetus is not a direct threat to you, you can't act in retaliatory force to something that is not a direct threat to you.
Well, sure. Well, I mean, that's kind of what I understand about the partridism, yeah. So essentially, right, if you're saying that if you never agreed to it, so it should maintain to you, a fetus never agreed to being alive or anything in that form, right? So we therefore shouldn't hold the exact same standards of, what do you call it, self-ownership, I believe?
Yes.
I think that's what you said. Okay, yes, self-ownership that's what I thought you said.
Right.
So why should we hold the values of self-ownership to something or someone that doesn't agree with it?
Right, because I mean, even with consent, me, let's say I got pregnant and wanted to have a kid, right? And I had this kid and I raised it, and it was like 16, okay? And my kid wants to commit suicide, okay? Like, just because you don't want to be alive, like for me, like even if I didn't want to be alive right now, I wouldn't be able to blame my parents on that simply because they gave birth to me. I think that's pretty ridiculous. Like, there was a guy in India who literally sued his parents for having him because he never agreed to it. Like, that's asinine.
I think I know what is it called? It's something or guardianship, isn't it?
De facto guardianship, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I remember someone telling me that, but I don't remember who. So essentially, you're saying the difference here is a contract.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, when it comes to certain issues, yeah.
How would that contract start?
So, let's say, I was the owner of the gated community and you wanted to come in and buy a plot of land. And I said, okay, well, you have to pay $10 every month for the security guards and maintaining maybe the neighborhood pool and stuff like that, just a small amount of money. I would present to you this contract, this piece of paper that would tell you all the rules that you have to abide by if you want to live here and stuff like that. And you would read through that contract and you would say, yeah, okay, I can agree to this. And then you would sign it. If you did not want to agree to it, you would not sign it. And I would decide whether or not you would get to live there.
Okay, cool. So really quick, what's the difference between an implicit contract and this contract that you physically sign? Because I would say it would be an implicit contract not even implicit. I would say it's an explicit contract. If I look at you and go, okay, well,
contract.
Okay, yeah. So would it both be contracts then? That you agreed to move into this gated community?
Contract is a thing for sure. Yeah, like if I was driving on the side of the road, right, and I kidnapped you and forced you into my car, and for some reason while we were driving, all of the air in the world became toxic. I would not be able to just throw you out into the air because it was implicit contract between you and I that because I put you in my car, now you have agreed to, or we have agreed to be in this car together because, now I can't just throw you out. That would be an implicit contract.
Sure, but my overall point is right. I would say there's if you would agree there's an implicit contract, that would entail that there's also an explicit contract, right? Because when you say implicit, that means that there's another alternative to the contract, and the only other alternative would be an explicit, right?
Yeah.
So if you go, well, you're physically signing a contract. I mean, that could be a one representation of a contract, right? But if I mutually say, hey, I'll agree to this, in a sense that you're just talking, not even signing anything. I agree to your rules. I'd say you're voluntarily agreeing to the rules in which this happens, and which this happens is through taxation, for social programs. So no, I wouldn't say that's necessarily theft because you're agreeing to it. You're
so you're saying this is an implicit contract?
I'm saying it's an explicit contract if you're going, yes, I agree to your rules.
Okay, yes, but what if I don't agree to these rules?
No, then you can't live in the country.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm as an anarchist.
Immigration-wise. Sure, if you're born here, I would say. I mean, it's still kind of debatable to an extent, but you could make that argument. But I'm not gonna hold every immigrant or to being natural-born citizens or natural-born citizens to every immigrant, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is this argument is sort of irrelevant to me since I'm arguing from an anarchist standpoint. Like, I don't believe in the concept of countries. I believe in private borders. So, like, if you have land, like, for example, there would be no America, no Mexico, no Canada. So it would just be this huge plot of land. And you decide who comes on your borders of your private property. There wouldn't be any implicit contract with immigrants because, it would just be explicit. Are you allowed to come onto this private property? Yes. Are you allowed to come onto this private property? No.
How would immigration work?
There wouldn't really be any immigration because there wouldn't be like countries. Immigration denotes the concept of countries to begin with.
We could say immigration to the extent of we could say there's two Ancap societies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Immigration to the extent of part of a society moves to another part of the society. We could say it's kind of like England to the United States.
Well, I mean, again, anarchism would have to be a global thing, so I don't really see how that would even happen.
How would why would it have to be on a global scale?
Because there would have to be you can't have countries when everything is privatized, when all land is privatized. You wouldn't have governments because there would be no public land, so there wouldn't be like borders. I don't really know how to explain it more simply than that.
Sure. So anyone can come and go as they please.
Sure. I mean, as long as you're not on somebody else's private property without their consent or voluntary action.
Sure. So, do you mainly argue from like studies from the standpoint of like philosophy?
I'd say a little bit of both. It depends on the subject.
How? So, wait, hold on. Because I'll get to the reason I'm asking this. What's the distinction between these two when it comes to certain subjects?
I mean, like when it comes to things like maybe systemic racism, we would use studies, but when it comes to like capitalism, we would use philosophy and studies. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of a little bit of both, but I'd say I use studies more for like social issues.
Okay, sure. So, you said capitalism. Quick question. What's your definition of capitalism?
Just a economic system that plays into society in which all action is based on voluntarism and private ownership of the means of production.
Did you come up with that yourself?
I mean, yeah, it's just sort of a summary, I suppose, of the definition.
Yeah, I got you, because it's kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like an appeal to authority for the most part when you try to like run off of someone else. That it's so weird because I've seen many people do that. But yeah. So essentially, sorry, can you repeat what your definition was? I wasn't paying attention that fully.
It's just voluntary association and private ownership of the means of production.
Okay, perfect. So, would you say the United States is capitalist?
No.
Why?
We do not have full private ownership of the means of production, nor are all associations.
Okay, so full ownership of the means of production.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the United States does have full ownerships of the means of production, right? Everything else is the same. Would you therefore say it was capitalist?
If we had full private ownership of the means of production,
Yes.
I mean, it would depend. Is there full voluntary association as well?
Well, it's according to how you look at voluntary when you take them to like contracts and everything.
Yeah, I mean, would there be taxation, for example?
Voluntarily, we could say no. We'll say no. And it's only an immigrated country, or
Okay,
United States in hypothetical situation.
Okay, so no taxation and all all means of production are privately owned. I would say yes. At that point, it would be mostly capitalist. Yeah.
Mostly capitalist. What's
Yeah, I guess there would just be so many other things you would have to take into consideration, in order for it to be. I would make the assumption that yes, it would be capitalist.
Oh, sure. So what's to prevent workers from being exploited?
Define exploitation.
Workers against or working against their will.
Working against their will. Okay, so like you put a gun to someone's head and say you gotta work.
I wouldn't necessarily say a gun, but sure, we could say a gun. How about that?
Okay, so I mean, obviously, this would be a violation of the NAP. That would not be allowed. You would be able to someone to court for that.
that's well, okay. We could say society is forcing you to work, or not necessarily forcing you to work, but if you want to live or die, they're forcing you to work in this society of capitalism, right? For people who can't, for people who can't work, we could say someone with back problems or something, right?
Okay, so are you insinuating that capitalism is work or die / coercive?
Towards people who can't live on their own, or needs how can I put this? Someone who can't walk, or someone who's blind, if you see what I'm saying.
Private charity.
Who's to say private charity will always hold up towards the benefit of an individual?
Well, it's been shown through multiple studies that charitable donations rise whenever tax cuts occur. And obviously, we've never had a taxless society, but we can assume that because when taxes go down, charitable donations rise, that when we completely eliminate a system of taxation, that charitable donations will skyrocket.
Well, inherently, or in many cases, I would agree, but inherently, I wouldn't say necessarily that it'll always go to the benefit of the individual, right? So in one case scenario where we could say that this piece of charity won't go to help the individual, they're just gonna die, right? So I would say it's kind of exploitive to make this person go work if they really can't work.
Okay, well, if you genuinely cannot work at that point, you're the liability of your family members or your friends or whoever is taking care of you, because obviously if you have that kind of a disability, you won't be living alone. You just can't take care of yourself. It's not the job of a stranger to be coerced into taking care of you. You should not be constrained to that.
So would you say it's exploitive though to force someone to go work if they had these problems?
Okay, well, who exactly is the person coercing them to work?
Society.
Okay, well, society is not a rational actor, so society cannot act. Society cannot be.
So you only okay. So you have to be a rational character to be a what did you call it?
In order to act in coercion, you have to have the ability to act, and if you have the ability to act, you have to be a rational actor.
Define rational actor.
Somebody who has the ability to have higher reasoning and can act on that higher reasoning.
I could say someone again with severe autism doesn't have the ability to act upon that higher reasoning.
Exactly, and a person with autism doesn't have, the full capacity of rights that we do because they don't have the ability to understand them.
So, what would you mean the full ability of rights? What's the distinction between different rights?
Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, self-ownership. So this person with autism wouldn't have full self-ownership because in order, again, to have property rights, you have to understand property rights. So if you don't have, or if you cannot completely understand self-ownership or property rights, then you don't have them to the fullest extent, which is where de facto guardianship comes into play.
Okay, perfect. So you said everything. Sorry. So you said you believe it's called self ownership, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's like a common denominator, or like a metric, to determine to like how can I put this? How much they understand their self ownership to determine that they have some form of self ownership to the point where you like if you see them in the street, you can't run up and kill them.
Well, right. I mean, you can't really run up and kill anyone, but when it comes to understanding rights and self ownership and all that, it's just whether or not you have rationality. Like the of an adult, for example, of a functional adult.
What would be the metric for that, though?
Just in mental disabilities, like there would just be there's different levels of rationality. It's not just do you have it or do you not. There's the fully functional adult, which we would consider full rationality. Doesn't have any mental disabilities or anything prohibiting them from understanding. Whereas with like a child, they don't have the same level of rationality as an adult. And with people who have severe autism may not have the level of rationality as an adult, but they have more than a baby, things like that. It's a spectrum.
Sure, but again, what would be the common denominator for that spectrum?
Again, we would just compare these people to like rational adults, fully functioning adults.
Oh, okay, perfect. So someone.
Can you come here real quick? Oh, okay. Where you go?
Sorry, my little brother came in. What was I gonna say? Okay, yeah. So if I have someone with severe autism, right, and he literally like I've seen this physically happen. He physically sexually assaults a girl. He doesn't understand what he's doing at all.
Mm-hmm.
When I say sexually assault, I mean he sexually assaults. You could just say he's like grabbing a part that he shouldn't grab, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would be the case here? He doesn't understand any form of property rights.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, we'll answer that in a minute. I'm going to go see what my little brother wanted.
Okay.
Give me a moment.
I can't hear you, Christian.
Yo, what's going on?
Oh, it looks like you said something. I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, no, I did. I had my thing on my soundboard turned on. How y'all doing? What's going on?
You're supposed to be paying attention. You're the mod.
Yo, I left it to do it because I needed to get a drink of water. I addressed this on my live stream.
Okay, Christian.
Yeah.
You're stupid.
Oh my god. You're a statist.
Damn, so true.
Yeah. Where's Taz?
His little brother needed something.
Oh, okay.
All right, sorry, I'm back. You there?
Okay, yeah, I'm here.
So what were we going over?
We were just talking about you brought up an example of a person with severe autism that may have like sexually assaulted a girl.
Okay, yeah. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that they're in no form of rational thinking or being able to rationalize in generally any way, but they'll have the general like ability to to move around, do anything in that typical area of just having the general functions of like running, breathing, stuff like that, right? I mean, sure, you could say like as a human they have that ability, but when we talk about rational, like they didn't even realize it was sexual, so like they didn't even understand. Like, I wouldn't even say, how could I put this? I wouldn't even say that they had the desire or sexual tensions or they even understood what was happening. It was that bad.
Okay. Well, in that case, I mean, again, in order to have rights, you have to understand them. So if this person is so low functioning, they don't understand the concept of self-ownership or property rights, that it would be perfectly okay to prosecute them simply on the basis of doing that, we wouldn't even need to put them through trial if we had like a witness. I mean, I guess technically we could put them through a trial depending on their level of functionality, but if they were to do something like that, this would just, it would be treated the same as any other situation.
Would you say that's like putting a dog to trial to compared to someone who doesn't even understand any form of property rights?
Well, yeah, I guess in that sense, but it's still this person is still a person, and they still acted in maliciousness, even if they didn't intend to. But yeah, there's still definitely a level of prosecution that can be done there.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, you would agree then, like, they don't have any form of that rational, how can I put this rational ability, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So then they wouldn't necessarily be in coercive, or what did you call it, coercer? I don't know how you worded it.
Coercer.
Okay, coercer. So they wouldn't be a coercer in a sense, like if they were to break into your house and like beat the shit out of you.
I mean, I think at that point, when it comes to people who are severely disabled like that, like the thing is they won't even be able to act on things like this. Like this is a pure hypothetical that I was going along with, but if we're being completely like biologically honest, someone with that little level of functionality is basically the equivalent of like a newborn, and a newborn can't do these things. So I really wouldn't, use this as a hypothetical.
Well, that's the point. It's supposed to represent something that's not of a rational being, and it has no like capacity to become a rational being. That's like what I'm trying to say. It's not coercive, but like the rational part of your definition.
Well, that's right? The thing. If they're not a rational being, then they're not going to be able to act on these things. They're not going to be able to sexually assault someone. Like if you're that irrational, like as irrational as a baby or less, like you're just not going to be able to do something like that.
How are you not going to be able to do that? Like
you cannot act in that form. Like you don't have the level of rationality to act in that sort of like malicious intent. Like you just can't do that kind of a thing. You're going to be so mentally impaired to the point where you won't be able to even process your surroundings, so you wouldn't be able to do something like this.
Well, sure, we'll say that. But genuinely, though, there could be one exception to. I wouldn't say that's inherently the case.
I would disagree. If you're that little, if you have that little function, how would you be able to even process your surroundings or act on any emotions or thoughts you may have? Like it's just if you're that not functional. That's why we don't put babies in school as soon as they're born, is because they're not functional enough. Like to.
Well, it doesn't have to be about thoughts. It's just about doing it. Not everything necessarily has to be thought out.
I wouldn't say thought out, but just like being able to think at all. Like,
well, you don't. Okay, cool. We could say if I went blind and deaf for a day, right? Or not even like I wore glasses and I wore like these headphones that made me blind and deaf for a day. We could say I had gloves on to limit my touch. I took away essentially every. We found a way to inhibit every sense I have, right? I would say that's essentially being really mentally impaired because you don't have a way to take into account of anything. So let's say then I just randomly walk up to, like, I'm just randomly walking because I still have that general ability to do that. I have no form of self-awareness. I have no form of anything in that general area. But when it comes to sentience or something like that, and I punched the living shit out of this girl, then I sexually assault her on accident. Like I punch it. Like I could say I think it's a tree. I don't know. I just like punching trees, something among that form. I mean, you get the idea. It's really stupid, but you should see what I'm saying here. So you punch this tree, or you think it's a tree, and it's a girl, and then you go to like grab this tree by like a branch, and you accidentally grab a part that you probably shouldn't. Even though you have no form of self-awareness, you have no form of how can I put this? Rational in a sense that you understand what's going on. Right? I mean, sure, you might be able to think.
Process your surroundings at that point, but you're still a rational being. You made the conscious decision to put on the glasses that made you blind, to take away your hearing, your touch, all those things. And so if you made the conscious decision to inhibit yourself in that sense, then I would say, yeah, you should definitely be prosecuted because you voluntarily did that to yourself, inhibited your senses, and then committed this crime. Like if you hadn't done that to your senses, you would have understood what was going on around you.
Well, sure, but then we could say someone forced them onto you. We could say you were kidnapped and someone forced them onto you. Put you in a van, drove you into like a center square of anywhere, right? We could say these gloves inside makes it feel like you're touching trees 24/7. I don't. It's some weird gloves, right? So someone kidnaps you, they put you in this van, they drop you off at some point, like around the block, right? And there's a big festival going on. So you walk around, you don't hear the festival, you don't see the festival, you just happen to walk into that direction, and then you do the exact same. So what would you say then?
If someone made you put on that stuff,
Sure, yeah.
that would be a violation of your self-ownership, and then they would be prosecuted for doing that to you.
Well, that's not my point, though. My point is generally like they lack this ability to rationalize.
I mean,
All they did was just start walking, right? And they just feel like, I don't know, they could try to start a campfire. They didn't realize that they had gloves that made them like, I feel like they had or they were touching trees 24/7. So like they don't necessarily have the form to rationalize to the extent of.
I mean, it's kind of a non sequitur though, because this isn't a thing. Like that won't happen. Like you're making up like hypotheticals that don't exist. Like that will never exist. Like you can't just buy gloves and everything you touch feels like a tree. Like that's not a thing.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that's not a thing. That can most definitely happen.
Yeah,
buy a tree. But we'll buy a tree. I should probably explain it more. Buy a tree. I'm not like physically talking like walking up to a tree and like groping it or like I don't know, like to the extent of like putting your hands all over. I mean, like if you're just bare, like like I'm assuming you touched a tree before, right?
Yeah.
The end tip of a tree, like the soft touch.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't understand what this has to do with that.
It doesn't necessarily have to be about an actual tree, but more of the sense that would mimic it.
That's not really a thing either, though. Like I feel like this is a complete non sequitur to my argument of rationality. Like obviously, babies and children and like don't have the same level of rationality as adults, but they still have self ownership to an extent. Like you can't kill them, you can't rape them just because they don't have the same level of self ownership as an adult. But like that's the same with like people who have severe impairments. Like they don't have the same level of rationality as a functional adult, but they still have some level of self ownership and can still be prosecuted on that basis.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
So, do you concede? Like, I don't understand.
I think it's just pointless. It's just going in circles at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree. We're almost at an hour anyway, so we can cut it off here if that's good for you.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
All right, Christian, you can turn the stream
Yes.
off if you want. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you guys for watching.
Just end the live, Christian.
Okay, I love you.
Okay.
No, I'm talking to the audience, not you, Chloe.
Okay.